All right, welcome back to the Quantum Photons. My name is Aaron.
And my name is Stefan.
And welcome back to the program. It is the Friday before Thanksgiving, so we want to obviously wish you a wonderful, if, of course, you're in the United States. Canada already had their Thanksgiving, because Canada's always got to be different than us, apparently. Canada did theirs a month ago or something, so they had their Canadian Thanksgiving, but now it's time for the American Thanksgiving, and that will be taking place this week on Thursday. Some of us have the whole week off. Others of us have to work Monday, Tuesday, and then be enjoying our turkey on the Wednesday or Thursday. Wednesday. No.
No, Thursday and Friday.
Thanksgiving.
It's Thursday.
So Thursday. Calendars are a challenge, apparently, on a Friday afternoon when it's been a long week. So that's kind of the deal there. We're happy that if you get to enjoy family or enjoy turkey, there's always the Thanksgiving parade, Macy's Thanksgiving parade on the televisions. You can watch that and enjoy that experience. And so happy Thanksgiving to those who will celebrate. And may your food be good and your time with family be full of love. All right, so to preview, we got a couple things in the hopper. I'll run through stories that I'm going to talk about, and then Stefan had one or two he wanted to mention. So there's an article this week about the polls. The polls, not the voting polls, because those are done and gone with, thank the Lord. No, we're talking about the magnetic pole, and the poles are shifting, according to an article from the Daily Galaxy. We're going to talk about that. In addition, all that's interesting, had a discovery of a saber-tooth kitten who had been stored in the permafrost for the last several thousand, maybe 34,000 years or something. We'll talk about that in detail. And so the fur is there. Everything as much as possible they could find is there. So there's a possibility that we could be dealing with the next Jurassic Park should somebody get a little bit crazy. And then the next story from Unilad, which that website is a website that you use for things. The title of the article is The Asteroid That Can Make Us Rich. We'll talk about the reality and the non-reality of that. And my fourth topic is an article I discovered, I think, this morning, and that there is a rocket launch that broke records, but it's not who you think it is. It's not NASA. It's not SpaceX. It's not even any of the Virgin Rockets guys. It's somebody else entirely. And then, Stefan, what do you have on the topic for the day, or topics?
So my topics are going to be about the recent, on Tuesday, the Starship 6 launch for SpaceX, its objectives, what happened, what didn't happen, and the reasons it didn't happen, and then the discussions of the possibility of the shutdown of NASA's Space Launch System due to a lot of different factors. So, and those factors we will get into and be able to discuss at length when we get there. So,
delightful. Lots of good stuff ahead. So, buckle in, grab your tea, grab your coffee. If it's an actual evening, maybe don't have the caffeine this late at night because then you'll be up. Maybe grab yourself some decaf and or a fruit beverage of some sort. We'll start with something that I had heard about, but had never really, I think we talk about it in science classes when we're in school. But there is the magnetic North Pole shifts. And it does. It moves and shifts, apparently. However, according to the physics section of thedailygalaxy.com, the magnetic North Pole is shifting in unprecedented ways. That is the word that drives me crazy. Unprecedented. I don't like it, but people keep using it. The Earth's magnetic pole is moving faster than ever before in a way that scientists have never observed. This unprecedented movement could have far-reaching consequences for modern navigation systems. So if you're wondering, we're talking about the North Pole, which is in and around Russia and everybody else, the Arctic Circle by Alaska and everything like that. And so it moves, but it's approaching Russia at a speed never seen before, which they say could spell disaster for smartphones and GPS devices because a lot of our technology depends on the magnetic poles. And so their question is, what's behind it? And they call it the race across the Arctic, which is hilarious. So the cornerstone of Earth's geomagnetic field, which I understand very little about. My Star Trek experience is like, oh, it's a geomagnetic field. There must be some polarity we can reverse. I don't think that's actually possible, but that's my Doctor Who experience coming into play as well. We're mashing Star Trek and Doctor Who together. So according to the magnetic North Pole has always been on the move, but not like this. Traditionally nestled near northern Canada, you're welcome, Canada, the pole began accelerating in the late 20th century, crossing into the Arctic Ocean in the 1990s. Since then, its pace has skyrocketed, reaching and they say this, I'm just like, a jaw-dropping 55 kilometers per year. That's okay. That's a lot apparently, but whatever. In my head, I'm just like, it took them a year. Okay, that's a slow-moving vehicle. 55 kilometers during the 2010s. Scientists now observe it as closing in on Siberia at a still rapid, and again, when I say that, 25 kilometers per year, that just seems. I mean, as scientists, that's probably crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, it's moving so fast. For me, I'm like, okay, well, 25 kilometers per hour is what I probably would drive on a neighborhood road.
That's 15 miles per hour.
15 miles per hour.
15.53 miles.
Okay, so it's moving. It's not moving. It's in our world. What we think is fast moving is not moving, but according to scientists, they are extraordinarily concerned. So in the late 20th century, it was 10 to 15 kilometers a year. In 2010, 55 kilometers a year, peak speed. That's the top speed of the the magnetic North Pole. And then 2018 to present, they are at an average of 25 kilometers per year. So they think that the current trajectory of the pole, it will reach Siberia in the coming decades if this trend continues. Such shifts are uncommon and indicative of changes deep within Earth's core. Now, here's the thing. We only have so much information to go on. So they have measured this thing all the way back to 1600 is what they have. They have data points on. So there's an image in this article, the meandering magnetic north. So in the 1600s, it was in above Canada, and then 1700s it moved, 1800s, 1900s, 1950, and now in 2025 it's headed to Russia, but it's closer to the geographical North Pole, which is fascinating to me because in my head as a kid I always thought the magnetic north was just geographical north. However, that's not the case. So the concern here is that if this thing heads more towards Russia and or bounces back or does whatever, it can cause some issues. Now, the causes are interesting, which whenever we start talking about this stuff, my mind goes to the movie The Core, which was a science fiction movie about they needed to restart the Earth's core because it stopped spinning or something. It was a bonkers movie. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. One of the opening scenes in the movie is people with pacemakers died because the magnetic field stopped working, and because pacemakers rely on the magnetic field or something like that. That's very simplistic. Just hear me out. But it's a scene in the movie where all of a sudden just people start boom and they die. And they're like, what's going on? And then they're like doing research and like, well, it happened to these people. Oh my gosh, it's the magnetics. Let's check the magnetics. And then things start happening around the world where the magnetic, the inner core rotation isn't working. So anyway, so
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go into the issues, do you want to actually know what the geomagnetic field is?
Certainly. Educate me, because I have no idea. I didn't get that far in my research.
So the geomagnetic field, or what we call Earth's magnetic field, it extends from the interior of Earth out into space.
Okay.
So it is a gigantic field. When it hits space, it interacts with the solar winds, which is, of course, a stream of charged particles that comes from the sun. So that is how, the Earth's magnetic field is all bonded together. So even though the magnetic field comes from Earth, it interacts with those solar winds. And so the issues with the solar winds can cause issues with it, but with the shift of the magnetic field moving, it can cause definite issues. So the whole point of it is the magnetic field comes from the Earth's interior and then goes out into space. So just a little easy explanation of what the Earth's geomagnetic field is for you before you go into the issues that can occur.
Lovely. So they think the culprit for this could be linked to a couple of things. And this is Dr. William Brown. He's a geomagnetic field expert. The culprit could be linked to the following. Earth's outer core dynamics. So they say changes in the molten iron flow between the crust alter the magnetic field's strength and orientation. That's number one. Number two, which you just mentioned, solar storms and winds. High-energy solar particles interacting with the Earth's magnetosphere may amplify fluctuations. We see that when we get sunspots or sunstorms. There's eruptions off the sun where there's the warning, okay, it's going to impact satellites. It's going to impact, whatever. So we always get those warnings. Additionally, historical pole reversals. It says over the last 100 million years, the poles have flipped nearly 200 times, with the last reversal over 800,000 years ago. So here's something interesting. Again, this is not based in any research. This is just based on this. We sometimes imagine that the world will always be as it has, but the reality of it is there have been ice ages. There have been the temperatures have fluctuated across the millions of years this planet's been around, and the poles have reversed. That's happened 200 times, and I don't know the rate and when that happens, but it feels like we are starting to slide towards a possible significant shift in the next 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 years where that pole is going to flip again. So it's very interesting to kind of just sit back and kind of go, you can't think too much about it because you start to worry. And you can't control the magnetic field. Like, you can't control the magnetic north. That's not something you can put your hands on and go, I fixed it. I'm Doc Brown. I've got 1.21 gigawatts. It's not how that works.
Star Trek can fix it.
Yes, somehow. Geordie or Scotty would make it happen. So the potential indicators of an imminent pole reversal is the weakening of the magnetic field strength globally, increased erratic behavior of the magnetic poles, and then persistent anomalies in specific regions, such as the South Atlantic anomaly. So there's an interesting kind of concern there that it's increasing. It's not happening like tomorrow it's going to flip. But there's concern that if we don't keep an eye on this, if we don't have the right people keeping an eye on this, it can get a little messy. So the issue here is magnetic orientation is deeply embedded in modern technology. The World Magnetic Model, the WMM, developed by the British Geological Survey and the National NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and something administration, tracks the pole's movements to ensure accurate navigation. So there's three pieces of technology.
Just so you're aware.
There we go. There was the other A was in there. I just couldn't remember where the atmospheric was. So smartphones depend on the magnetic field because they use magnetometers for orientation. Cars, onboard navigation systems, because everything's electronic these days, they use magnetic updates. Military equipment, aircraft and ships rely on accurate compass data. So if the magnetic pole shift outpaces updates to the WMM, devices could miscalculate locations, leading to errors in navigation and orientation.
What a nightmare.
That is, it's kind of like Y2K, but we fixed Y2K. Like, Y2K didn't happen because we knew about it and we were working to make sure it didn't happen. Now, there's things that they're doing to try and fix this, which I'm like, okay, cool. Someone smart enough who probably makes enough money to take care of this is on it. So they talk about, number one, they do frequent updates to the WMM, and they say every 5 years or earlier if the shifts accelerate. So whoever's in charge of the WMM, they're probably very busy making sure that nothing goes wrong. I suspect it's probably like a team of 20. Like, it's probably not a big team. But you never know. Who knows? Who knows in charge of the WMM? And then they're doing research expansion. They're continuously monitoring Earth's core dynamics. And then public awareness, making sure that people know what's going on. So they're keeping an eye on it. It's interesting that because it's slowed down, that may mean that the shifting is done for a bit and may continue to slow down, or it may accelerate. So who knows? We're very interested. So there you go. That's the latest breaking science fiction story idea that someone could put together a movie about the shifting of the poles. And I'm sure there's a direct to video movie that's covered this at length in terrible CGI detail, because I'm sure there's there's probably been a movie probably starring Sylvester Stallone called The Pole Shift or Shifting Poles, and it's got a bunch of B level actors or C level actors who are just trying to get that money.
So you don't like Stallone? Is that what you're telling me?
No, actually, Stallone. I'm sorry. Stallone's fine. Stallone's brilliant.
Okay.
I love Stallone.
Say what?
Steven Seagal. I was thinking of Steven
okay.
Seagal. Sorry, I'm getting my male action stars mixed up. Stallone is a legend. The man has managed to keep his career pretty stable.
Yeah, he's been working
Seagal
on an
has
amazing
gone
TV show. Just a plug.
Yeah, I need to watch it. I've heard good things.
It's
People
really
are actually
good. Really good.
pretty excited about it. So there we go. So no, Steven Seagal would have. He probably has or will star in this movie now that I've manifested that destiny. So there you go. Okay, so the magnetic poles. Actually, do you want to? Let's just. You know what? Let's just see. Let's see. Is there
You're gonna see if there's a
about movie about? Let's see. Movie about a boot about the pole shift. Yep, there is. The Polar Storm from 2009. It's available on Tubi. And Ground Zero, The Deadly Shift, also in 2008 and also on Tubi. Both are rated PG-13.
Look at the actors. Ugh. None of these people are particularly famous.
You know, you just do what you can. You know, it's just
Polar Storm got 3.7 out of 10 stars.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a feeling. So there's at least 2 movies that we know of that have been produced about it. The Deadly Shift. Oh, there's also the Deadly Shift.
Deadly Shift.
Polar Opposites. That's the one. So Polar Shift and Deadly. So there's multiple names for these movies, apparently.
Apparently, Polar Opposites is also.
Begin reversing.
It's a song by Drake too. Apparently.
Oh, good old Drake.
Oh, that movie got
make a diss track on us.
The Ground Zero, The Deadly Shift got 3.3 out of 10 stars. These movies are really going good.
That's positive. So here's the movie about Ground Zero, The Deadly Shift. When Earth's magnetic poles begin reversing, the only scientist who predicted such an event must join forces with his estranged friend and lover to save the world. Ground Zero, The Deadly Shift. Rated PG-13. So there's your movie. There it is.
It does have Charles Shaughnessy in it, who is a somewhat popular actor. I don't really know any of these other ones, but
Polar Opposites was a TV movie in 2008.
I probably would never watch either of them.
So, I love I'm reading like a piece of the plot thing for Polar Opposites. It's like then an Iranian underground nuclear test sets off a global, and I didn't read the rest because it's a link on Google. I'm like, this just sounds like a really
phenomenon that
convoluted
matches
story.
David's doomsday scenario.
Well, David was right. He was right all along. Those darn Iranians and their testing of their nuclear weapons, it's all their fault now.
I feel like we have to watch these movies to see how bad they really are.
No, I refuse. I will not.
No, just
Absolutely
watch.
not.
There's people on YouTube
trailer?
that have done reviews on these movies. Just watch one of those and you're good.
Yeah. I'll probably be just fine. Thank you very much. I had a feeling because there was the core, which was about restarting the core. And then there was
I need
Deep
to look
Impact.
that one up. I've never seen the core.
The core actually had a good cast. It was just really corny. It was 2003. So
it did better than them.
End.
It's 5 out of 10 stars.
Yeah. Yeah. It had Aaron Eckhart, DJ Qualls, Hilary Swank, Stanley Tucci, Bruce Greenwood, who played in Star Trek, Delroy Lindo, Richard Jenkins, and Alfred Woodard, who played in Star Trek as well.
It had some famous people in it.
Yeah, it had, but it was bad. It was just like it. So this is what the thing about those disaster movies of the late 2000s and early 2000s. There was only so much that you could do with it. Like, so Deep Impact, there was Deep Impact, there was Armageddon, there was The Core, there was a bunch of other, like, disaster movies that really were just...
Armageddon? Wasn't it a disaster movie?
Yeah. Yep, Armageddon. So there was a time when these movies were really, really popular and really, really fun, and then they kind of faded. And then 2012, that movie came along, and people started trying to do San Andreas and everything else. And so it's cyclical. These disaster movies are cyclical. They come out,
come back,
there's too much of it, and they will come back again because someone finds out, hey, I can do practical and CGI, and I can do it.
Maybe someone will make a good one. Maybe. just maybe someone could actually make a good one that would be actually worth the watch. Armageddon actually is probably one of the highest rated like disaster films of that time.
It's not bad. Armageddon, it's you understand what the movie is doing and why,
Right.
but it really was Armageddon Michael Bay?
No, it was Bruce Willis. Oh, you mean the director?
Director.
Oh, sorry. Well, you didn't clarify those things.
Yeah, it was Michael Bay. And that
Okay.
was in 98, if you can believe it. So 1998 was when Armageddon was put together. And that had Bruce Willis, Liv Tyler, Ben Affleck, Billy Bob Thornton, Steve Buscemi, Owen Wilson.
I love the fact that the movie related to it is Con Air.
Yes, good old Con Air.
Which is a great movie.
Con Air is fun.
Yes.
Yeah, Con Air is fun to watch.
100% agree. I love that movie.
Yeah, so like Armageddon, I would watch it. I'd probably fast forward a little bit, but Armageddon is at least fun. It's at least got a cool, like it's gonna entertain you. But some of these other disaster movies, it was just like you're taking yourself too seriously.
Why am I watching this?
Why am I watching? I need to find something else to watch because I'm losing my time. I'm losing time that I had, and I don't want to give any more of it up. So that we might do like in the future do like the top disaster movies of all time that we've watched.
Boy.
We might do like a rating of that and go through what we've seen.
I got a comparison. You know, we're science fiction here too, Aaron. So, disaster movie or Star Trek Nemesis?
Oh boy, I would take a disaster movie over Star Trek Nemesis. So over on a podcast we do over at BravoFleet.com. It's called Relay Station Bravo. We did a review of Star Trek Nemesis, and there's a lot that's at issue with Star Trek Nemesis. It's a movie that doesn't know what it's doing, and doesn't know what it wants to do either. It's also the movie that launched Tom Hardy into Hollywood, which is both shocking and disappointing because he's so young in this movie. It's just it's disappointing, and it ends with the Starship Enterprise in space dock, like the soaring dun 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 dun, and then it's fading, and that's it. I was like, what? What are you doing? And the CGI was not great. They killed Data, but then brought him back with Before or Benign or whatever he was.
Fun
and
fact,
it was
the first Star Trek movie I ever watched.
Oh, you poor soul. It's rough. It is of all of them, and I've watched all of them in my life.
It has a few merits. Very few merits.
Not many.
That's what I said. Very few.
Not many.
I'd say one of my favorites, First Contact. Personally,
First Contact's up there, and First Contact brings us the Borg, but it also allows us to talk about Picard and being haunted by the Borg, and everything like that. So yeah, it's there are not a lot of Star Trek movies that are absolutely just like I will not watch that again.
And
but
Nemesis is one of them.
Insurrection. Yeah, Nemesis is one of them. The other one is Insurrection. I don't enjoy Insurrection.
Not my favorite.
It's just I think the problem with Insurrection is that it's such a TV episode movie that should have just been a TV episode, and it just Insurrection. There's a lot of like trying to make Picard like have him have a girlfriend and playing at this, and it's like no, this is you're playing with a formula, and I don't like it. Plenty of people liked Insurrection. Don't get me wrong, and there's people who love Nemesis. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, but that ain't me. So. I don't know.
Only
Star
thing
Trek,
I thought was cool,
movies.
and I'm just going to admit it, you're probably going to not like me for this, but of course this was the first Star Trek movie I ever watched. I like the scimitar. I just like the ship, like not like.
Yeah. So here's the thing. That's what that movie does, right? It has parts and pieces where you're like, that was really cool. That was cool too. This was dumb. That was dumb. This was really stupid. Why did you do that? But hey, you got these other things that are really great. And oh my gosh, this thing you did over here in the background, dude, that's solid. Okay, really, you could have used more of that. But no. You had to do all this. What is all this? And why is it here in the movie? Doesn't need to be here. Get rid of it.
I like the scimitar.
Not how they worked it.
I thought it was stupid when they tried to ram the Enterprise into it, but whatever. That just doesn't...
so if I remember correctly, I think
We're derailing into science fiction, but it's okay. We can do this. This is our podcast.
I don't care. It's our podcast. I don't care. I got to be able to type here. Hold on. So I think, they Star Trek Nemesis. Who is the director of that thing? Oh, Stuart Baird. That's interesting. So I thought it was Nicholas Myers, but he had directed Executive Decision, U.S. Marshals,
some decent movies.
Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, some decent movies.
He has some other ones that you probably don't remember.
Right.
And then I'm going to double check his IMDb. I'm going to see what his last movie that he directed, because
Bitter Harvest, it looks like.
Let me find directorhood here. Known for as 3 movies that he directed. So hold on, director. Yeah, no, he 3 movies. He directed Executive Decision, U.S. Marshals, and then Star Trek Nemesis, and never directed anything ever again.
Oh.
He has been an editor, so he has been primarily an editor. So he's edited 47 Ronin. He's edited Skyfall. It's what it looks like. Casino Royale. I mean, he edited Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, Legend of Zorro. He is like, his editing resume is incredible.
Great.
Like, dude, Demolition Man, Maverick, Tales from the Crypt, Showdown in Little Tokyo, Die Hard 2, Lethal Weapon 2. The man has the reputation as a strong editor.
Not a director.
And if you remember, so here's the thing. So think about this. And I've seen these movies, so your mileage may vary. So Executive Decision is Kurt Russell basically trying to rescue the president or something with Executive Decision is a fun little movie. I think I've seen it. But 1996. And then U.S. Marshals was the sequel to the Harrison Ford The Fugitive. And U.S. Marshals is kind of U.S. Marshals is kind of forgettable. It's cool, like it's Tommy Lee Jones and they're back and they're doing things, but it doesn't have that same punch. It doesn't have that same kind of like woo. So then he doesn't direct anything after 1998 until they pulled him out to do Star Trek Nemesis in 2002, and he never directed again. And here's the thing, like if you've got Executive Decision on your resume and you've got U.S. Marshals on your resume, that's not bad. Like that's a good gig, right? You've got two middling movies. Like they were good for the late 90s.
The one has Steven Seagal in it.
When he was okay. When Seagal was normal and not in a place where he was not slightly. He's a very unbalanced individual now. I am very concerned for his mental health. But Executive Decision was when Seagal was in his prime. 1996, Steven Seagal was in Under Siege 2. He was the action star. He was in the league of Jean-Claude Van Damme. He was with Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, all those ghouls. Chuck Norris. He was in there. He was a peer. And then in the last 20 years, something happened, and Steven Seagal had gone a little bit
down the way.
But anyway, so you think about it, like this dude had the U.S. Marshals Executive Decision under his belt, and then
he went to Nemesis.
He said, "Oh, you want to direct a Star Trek movie?" And he's like, "Ooh, Star Trek! That would be a cool third one to add to my belt. Let me do that."
Bomb.
No. And here's the thing: my guess is they gave him a junk script.
Probably.
And he was probably just trying to make it out of there alive.
Yeah.
Like, and you watch that movie. There's moments in this movie where you're like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And those moments are so fleeting. It infuriates me.
You have like a really nice shot of like the Enterprise in space, and then you go to the Argo on the planet.
Yeah. Oh, man. Don't even get me started. If you want to listen to that episode, you can find it over on BravoFleet.com, under the podcast link. It's Relay Station Bravo. I really, 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 really do not like Nemesis. But it's interesting, right? Because he was the director. He was the guy
That's
in charge.
Crazy. Yeah, that's
crazy. I feel bad for him. It is. It's a little bonkers. So there we go. There's your science fiction discussion time.
I like that veer.
Pretty well.
That veer was a good time. I like that.
Yeah, we veered. We're veering, but no more veering. We're getting back on track. Do you want to talk about your launch stuff?
I can talk about one of them, and then you can talk about one of yours, and I'll talk about mine. So, on Tuesday, NASA. SpaceX launched the 6th Starship test flight. This test flight was great, Aaron. I don't know if you saw it. I think it is. I gotta remember the ship number for that. Hold up, I gotta look this up.
Holding up, standing by.
Starship. Ship number. So if you look up S. Oh, geez, computer, please work. Thank you. S31 banana. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. If you Google that and you go to images, you're going to see on the side of that starship was a banana.
Okay.
And in the banana's hand was another banana that said 4 scale. So when they launched this, ship, the gravity indicator inside of the ship was a banana it was strapped inside. So the whole point of this test flight was, one, to gather more data. They were going to, of course, land the booster back down into the tower, and then they were actually doing a daytime landing in the Indian Ocean, which this is the first time they had done that. Most of the time when they did it, it was dark. You couldn't see it. It was pitch black. So they launched. Everything was going great. They separated the booster. They got the call that the tower was able for catch, so everything was set for the booster to come back for catch. And then all of a sudden, they said booster divert offshore, which for anybody who understands rocket terminology, that means that they diverted the booster for an offshore landing. So I did some research afterwards, because X is very heavily for SpaceX, and Elon Musk is also heavily there. So you can figure things out pretty simply.
Right.
So the reason that they diverted, the launch tower's communication mast actually bent. Like, if you looked, it was bent. It wasn't straight. So they lost comms with the tower, with like the tower's main central computer system. According to Musk, they probably still could have landed the booster, but one thing I will give SpaceX prop for is they're safe. They're going to do it the safest way that they can. So they diverted the booster and landed it successfully in the water, where it exploded into a fiery fireball.
Of course.
The ship coasted for about an hour. It got into coming back into the reentry of the Earth's atmosphere. They have an amazing view. If you've never watched it, you should totally watch it, because you can actually see like the plasma around the rocket as it's coming down. And they got a view after it had really entered past the hottest part, and one of the fins was actually so hot it had melted part of it. So that's something that they take that information to make it stronger for the next flight, obviously. And then before they landed, they actually took the nose of the ship and put it into a very deep dive compared to what they would usually do. They were pretty much testing this ship to see how much of a max capacity of pressure and what they could do. Like, they were trying to break it pretty much. So it got down and it landed successfully in the water. No issues. If you look closely at the ship when it was landing, you could see some of the heat shields had come off. So that is their next big thing, is to get the heat shield where that's not going to happen. But that's the whole point of this testing. It's helping them prepare for better. They said that their goal is to launch to Mars in, 2025? So they're moving along, and the FAA has sped up their process approval for them to launch, because they just launched last month. And usually it takes months in between. It did not take even a month. So they was successful in what they wanted to do. They probably could have landed the booster, but they were being safe, which is a really good thing. That tells you a lot about what they want to do. But it was a successful flight. They got tons of information. And like I said, if you've never actually watched one of these test flights, I highly recommend it. It's a really cool thing to watch. It's not like anything you've ever seen, especially if you want to see a booster catch. Watch the Test 5 launch. And then if you actually want to see the ship land in the ocean in the daytime, you would need to watch the Test 6 launch. So I am a huge advocate of what SpaceX does. They are truly pushing the boundaries as to what we can do in humanity when it comes to rocketry and for the betterment of,
Right.
our space travel. So I watch every single one of these launches, even if it's not live. I will go back and I'll watch it later. I keep high track of it. In fact, the only notifications I get on X is from SpaceX when they're launching a rocket or anything like that. So they've launched a ton of Starlink satellites in the past week. So they're they're super busy, and they continue to do more and more. So I'm excited to see what the next launch is going to look like, what they're going to do with it, because I'm sure they're going to change their their whole flight pattern and what they do there. But it was an incredible thing to watch. It was not a failure. Some people would say it's a failure, but it's no failure if they're getting data to be able to improve it to the point of what they actually want it to be. And what most people, don't know is they actually want to make it bigger. So that's the V1, which, if you look in the image there, that's the V1. They want to make what they're calling the version 2, which is actually going to be even bigger. So, yeah. And it's already the most powerful rocket to ever launch from Earth. So it's pretty incredible. So that's that. Like I said, I highly recommend, if you've never watched it, just go to SpaceX's website. You can look at their launches, and it'll take you straight to the stream, and you can watch these streams and see it. They actually explain a lot of the stuff before they even launch. So for people who are not super smart or don't understand rocketry very well, they explain it in a way that even like someone who's not educated can understand it, which is a really good thing, because it helps to let others watch that stuff. So
nice. Heck yeah. That's awesome. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to tackle one more story. My other two, the asteroid story. So if you're curious, you can go search unilad.com and search for the asteroid. The thing about the article is it's not really substantive. It basically is clickbait, is what it ends up being. And Unilad is known for that. Like, I'm just like, okay, you're not really. The headline is asteroids worth $10 kajillion trillion that NASA's capturing would give everyone on Earth, $1 billion each. But it's a false argument, because there's no way that money would be dispersed to everybody on the Earth, because whoever mined it would get all the money. And it's an interesting article, because the desperation of how much we need these metals for cars and other mechanical computer operations. Like, if we can get that asteroid, it's going to take us a while to get there, but if we can get it, we can make things that we need to make for a long time. Anyway, the article is basically clickbait. So I'm not going to discuss it, because it was too clickbaity. After thinking it through as I'm listening to you and I talk, I'm like, all right, we're not going to do the clickbait today. You can go look at it yourself at unilad.com and search for the asteroid thingy, and you'll find it. But this is not clickbait. So according to allthat'sinteresting.com, a 37,000-year-old saber-toothed kitten was found naturally mummified in eastern Siberia. This was on November 20th of 2024. Kalina Fraga wrote the story. And there's photos of it, and it's legit. Like, if you go to allthat'sinteresting.com and search for the saber-toothed kitten mummy, they have full on, like, it's got the fur and everything. So in 2020, they found evidence of this incredible ecosystem. Siberia had once had remarkable wildlife like mammoths, woolly rhinos, lions, bison, and wolves. So in 2020, they found that there was evidence to suggest in the permafrost that this ecosystem existed. So they found the preserved mummy of a saber-toothed kitten. Saber-toothed kitten. Wow. Saber-toothed kitten. Not a chicken. Kitten. Don't say that 5 times fast. You're liable to get censored by the communications department. Just 3 weeks old when it died, it was still covered in a coat of soft, dark fur. The 37-year-old saber-toothed kitten is a remarkable discovery for a number of reasons. First of all, it's the first saber-toothed cat mummy ever. Like, we've always found, like, bones and stuff like that and skeletons, but we've never actually found a mummy with actual color of their fur, what their teeth look like as a kitten. And thinking about it, if it's just a 3-week-old kitten when it's dead and it's got all this fur and teeth and stuff, That's an incredible amount of growth that happens. So they first just published a study in Scientific Reports. They were looking for mammoth tusks, and they came across the tiny, incredibly well-preserved mummy in the Siberian permafrost near the Badrika River. And so they have pictures on there. They've done X-rays. They've done pictures. It's legit. It looks a lot like a modern lion cub, with some exceptions. They took it to the Russian Academy of Sciences, where they started to investigate and started to figure out what it was. And there's all kinds of pictures of what it looks like versus what you would see in an actual animal. There's a wide paw, the sub-square shape of its pads, and the absence of a carpal pad or adaptations to walking in snow and low temperatures. Although these features can be interpreted as adaptations to living in a cold climate. So they believe the kitten was only 3 weeks old, but that it lived for just a short time, tens of thousands of years ago. It can tell us a lot about things. So there's a lot of still to be discovered, a lot of still to be figured out. It's just an exciting discovery. There's possibly more in the Siberian permafrost. They've studied prehistoric birds and even viruses that were preserved in the ice, which is a scary, scary thing. So there you go. There's your slightly unnerving but exciting discovery from the Siberian area of Russia, where they will hopefully find more and more to illuminate the past creations and creatures that served on this planet. What is your next article / subject for discussion?
Not really an article, just a discussion that I want to have with you.
Okay.
I know you're not huge.
You're wrong, and I'm right, so...
Wow.
Oh, you wanted a discussion. You didn't want...
So
okay,
that's how this podcast goes then.
That's how we're doing things now. We're just going to be like, shutting you down. That's all there is to it. Okay, what do you got? What's up?
So, of course, rocketry, it's my thing. You're not huge into it, but yeah. I have a few questions for you. So, slated after the whole change of political stuff, which we won't get into, there is now a huge indication that NASA's space launch system could be completely squashed, gone, ended. And one of the biggest issues with it is the fact that it is $2 billion per launch.
You were telling me about that before we started recording, and I was like, "What? How is that even feasible? How is $2 billion? How is that okay?"
I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand because, the whole thing about us getting up into space again, getting to the moon, to Mars, beyond, is we need new technology, not old technology. Because obviously it got us, the space shuttle, what could it do? It got us into low Earth orbit. That was it. Yeah. It was the only reason it was used, to get us to the space station, to build the space station. It did not go past that point. Such a powerful machine, and it could not go past low Earth orbit. There's a problem there. And then the whole space launch system is based off of used parts from the space shuttle. None of it's new. Even the Aerojet Rocketdyne newer engine does not compare to the power of Blue Origin's newest engine or SpaceX's newest engine.
Right.
So what is NASA doing? Why are they using stuff that is... It's not the future. It's not the pinnacle of technology. And why does it cost $2 billion for a launch? Right. One of those starships, and I'm pointing to my model because it's right there and it's perfect for this. One of those, the biggest rocket ever, the most powerful rocket that's ever launched off the face of the Earth, can launch at $10 million.
Yeah.
That's a 99.5 something percent difference in price. Mm-hmm. I can't fathom why it takes that much money, and I can understand why they want to kill it. Am I okay with people losing their jobs? No, absolutely not. I don't like that. But that money could be used for something completely different that NASA could then consolidate that money and use a commercial space program like SpaceX or possibly Blue Origin. They're getting ready here soon to launch their New Glenn rocket, which is really cool, and I'm excited for that. To do the things that the SLS was trying to do. The Artemis program even though the SLS was part of it, still planned to use the Starship to launch people into space. So why not just use the Starship instead of using an outdated piece of equipment that obviously you've had so many issues with? It's been delayed. Already been. It was slated to launch. I believe it was supposed to launch this year, actually, like last year, and then it was delayed a year, and then it was delayed another year. Like, they don't know when it's going to launch next. They have delays on certain parts and heat shields, and like the government red tape doesn't help, but still, there should not be this many problems. If SpaceX, which, of course they have a man who's really rich, but still,
right.
If it takes $2 billion to launch a NASA rocket, you can launch one of those for $10 million, and he already has multiple more already built to prepare for launch. There's a problem with the system here. Like, I don't understand it. Like, do you think it's worth using that money that could be used for something else to launch an outdated rocket into space?
Well, I think so. It's a perception issue, I think, was what you've got. Because I don't have the knowledge of the inner workings and anything like that. But I think what America, if you asked an everyday American, or you asked somebody and you just said, hey, knowing what you know of the space program and its trajectory and where we've come and where we've gone, we used to go to the moon quite regularly, and then we shifted our focus to building the International Space Station and being able to go into low Earth orbit and have a reusable launch machine, all that kind of stuff, yada yada yada. Okay, but if you were to ask people now, it's like, hey, and because it was kind of a resurgence during, I think, sort of during Trump's first presidency. A little bit during Biden's first couple of a year or so, but there was a resurgence of people wanting to go back to the moon because that was where we had been. We had done that, and we wanted to go back because we want to put a moon colony up there, yada, 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 yada. It's interesting that, and again, there's reasons for it, obviously, and I'm sure if we dug into it, we could find it. But if you look, what is stopping us from being able to do what we did in the 60s and the 70s to get back to the moon? What is holding us back from going back to the moon and doing the things that we want to do with a moon colony or something? And I know it's very complicated and complex, but again, to your point of the money that's being spent, and again, I'm not a budget expert. I don't know where all that money goes. I'm sure it goes to things that need to be done for this launch, but if you were to ask an everyday American of like, how do you want the government to spend your money? Because in the end, it's the people's money that they're spending. Would you want them to spend that money on getting to the moon to launch a moon base or a moon whatever, and then eventually, which I know SpaceX and Musk are looking towards Mars really seriously, that's their next goal. Why hasn't NASA picked that up? Or at least kind of returned. And again, this sounds really terrible, but look, there are enough people alive today that remember the moon landings. They remember going to the moon, and there's enough people who have watched the movies and have watched the footage and have a connection to that moon, Apollo 13. Like, they have connections to all of that, and so I think people are maybe feeling, and this is again just a personal statement. I'm not saying this with any kind of expertise, but people want, we've talked about this a little bit, people want to see us explore. They want us to go farther. They want us to see us go into the next thing. John F. Kennedy's proclamation when he was president was, in the next decade, we will go to the moon. In the next decade, they went to the moon. And people want that ingenuity and that energy and that motivation and that passion. They want that back. They want their space program to go into space, to go into the final frontier, the undiscovered country, the space. Like, they want that Star Trek travel. Now, I don't think we'll ever get to Star Trek point. You never know; it might happen. But they want us. They want to go. They want to go farther. And the struggle, to your point, is all they see us doing is going into the International Space Station, and not doing so well with that because of issues with Boeing's contractors who were not doing their jobs and getting things where they needed to be. And so what has happened is we've created this kind of stigma, deserved or undeserved, perceived or not perceived correctly, that our space program isn't going anywhere, at least the government space program. The problem with that is Elon Musk and others are going places and are doing things. And people are seeing that and going, well, why can't they do that? And the answer to that question, I think, again, it's not a simple one, it's a complex one. And I think to your point, there's a lot of government bureaucracy and red tape involved in a lot of our programs across all departments, from NASA to, commerce to everything. Like every department in the government has a massive amounts of red tape that really needs to get cleaned up and taken care of. So I think part of it is that we're stuck in this idea that, well, we only can do so much. And there's this feeling for me, and maybe I'm misstating this, but there's this feeling of, where's our sense of exploration and where's our sense of going and doing the next big thing? Kind of your point, like, why aren't we spending money on getting us out beyond Earth, getting to the moon, getting to Mars, doing the next big thing? Why are we so focused on spending $10 billion with a B on a launch for something that may or may not work or may not succeed? And so, but then it's compared up against all these other companies that are doing it well, and they're privately funded and accepting public money and stuff like that, and they're outperforming NASA by leaps and bounds. And every time they're learning something new, they're making inroads into eventually getting beyond Earth's orbit and into the depths of space. So the answer to the question is equal parts simple but equal parts complex. And if we were to ever dig into NASA's publicly available budget, I'm sure we would spend hours digging into it and trying to understand it.
Let's not.
Yeah.
I've done budgeting for NASA.
Yeah. It's not your friend.
No.
But I think that's the thing is that there's only so much that we know about how it all works and how how the cheese gets made or the sausage gets made or whatever you want to call it. But we also know what Americans and historically have wanted from the space program, and we know what they've responded to. They've responded to risk.
That's the thing.
They've responded to challenge. They've responded to going forward to the next big thing.
And that's the thing. NASA was known. They got us to the moon. They got us to do something that man had never done before. And now, they're still launching scientific stuff and all this stuff, but they're using commercial companies to launch their stuff. SpaceX, they've used, what's the name of it? Rocket Lab. They use commercial companies to do it. So, my question is, why don't they focus on getting the equipment needed to start that base, to colonize and get the astronauts, but just let a commercial company do the heavy lifting? And part of it they are letting SpaceX do, but then part of it they also wanted to have the SLS do. And I'm like, well, why have it do that when the Starship has already had 6 test flights and is way more successful in 6 flights than it was in 1? I just, there's a lot of things in my brain that don't coalesce, so to speak. NASA is great at science. They're great at the scientific advancements, at the objectives of learning new things about our universe, about Earth. But when it comes to launching a rocket, they have not been dependable in a very long time. I mean, once the space shuttle program ended, they used Russian Soyuz rockets, and then after that, once SpaceX came into play and the test flights occurred and they approved it for launch, they used SpaceX to launch pilots or astronauts into space. So why use a rocket that you're obviously still working on, still in development of, when there's already rockets that can do what you need to do being made? That would save the budget for them, allow some of that money maybe to go to those commercial space programs if they need it. But, SpaceX has so many contracts anyways. They work for the DoD, they work for NASA. They don't need that. But then NASA could focus on the things that need to be done to making a moon colony possible without having to worry about getting a rocket to a pad to launch, making sure it was ready and able. I mean, SpaceX has taken over one of the launch complexes at Cape Canaveral. Blue Origin has taken over another launch complex at Cape Canaveral. They're having companies that can do the work for them.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that just seems to be the best beneficial way, especially as even if I was not in the field that I'm in, my analytical mind, that would seem like the best thing. Because one, it's going to make Americans happy. They're going to see rockets launching. They're going to see astronauts going back into space to do the things that we've wanted to see, since the moon launches back in the 60s, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you don't see that. I mean, the International Space Station's great. Don't get me wrong. Some of the scientific discoveries it's given us is incredible. You wouldn't have your smartphone without it. But,
right.
And I'm not dissing NASA. I love NASA. But I just don't think $2 billion per launch is worth that revenue cost.
Yeah. Well, and the other issue is, and we talked about this last episode, we'll probably close it on this one, is the space station is approaching retirement time. They're actively talking about they're going to have to bring it down. There's been issues with leaks.
It's already in a decaying orbit.
Yeah, it's not in a great position. There's leaks on the Russian side. There's issues on the American side. So it's a situation where eventually, that station's going to have to go, and it's lasted a long time. It's done a lot, like you said, a lot of great work, but we, as Americans, we look and we go, okay, you've probably known that it was reaching its end time. What are you doing to prepare for the next big thing? And unfortunately, the other companies that have stepped into the breach, they're the ones that are doing it. And my hope, and my fingers are crossed, my toes are crossed, my eyes are crossed, whatever's crossed, that maybe NASA will slowly but surely be able to go, oh, okay, let's shift into being more of an administration of all of this, where all these companies report to us and we work with them and we interface with them, and that's the natural progression of our relationship with space travel, because we can still train astronauts, we're still good at that, but we're not doing so well when it comes to the actual mechanical operating vessels that are going to go into space. The other guys have done a lot better, and Again, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't see inside these meetings. We can't see inside these guys' heads. We don't know if it's a pride issue. We don't know if it's just an issue of finally letting go or giving permission, or if it's a political issue. If it's like, man, they don't like this particular guy in charge of this company, and they're not going to partner with him as much as possible, and maybe that changes in the next electoral cycle. I don't know. There's a lot of questions, and there's not a lot of answers, and there's also that added layer of things have a habit of kind of being about more than just the actual thing. Like, it's like, hey, are we going to go to Mars? Yes. Can we go there? Sure. Who are we going to go there with? Well, that guy. Ooh, we don't know how we feel about him. And it's like, great, but he's the only gig in town. Like, he's the only guy that can make this happen in the next couple of years. Otherwise, it's going to be 10 years before we even get close to it. So we got to figure out a way to work with the dude. So, again, it's very complicated, and it's also simple. And that's what boils down to a lot of our issues and a lot of our conversations, both about culture, science, and politics in the country at the moment. But it's fascinating. I get a kick out of talking about it, but I'm also just like, at some point we have to figure out how to move forward as a country when it comes to space travel and our space exploration. Right. We're still real. Go ahead.
NASA makes great scientific equipment, satellites, probes. Like, they know how to do that. Leave that to them. That's fine. Yeah. Just leave the rockets to someone who's dependable and can do it, and let's move on to the next generation of what we're able to do.
Get us Jean-Luc Picard in here. We gotta get DeForest Kelly to hand over the keys to the Enterprise. Let's do it. There you go. There's our closeout. Interesting fun fact. We were doing a review of Star Trek Generations, which, interesting enough, Generations celebrated a 30 years since release date, which made me feel really old. 30 years since Star Trek Generations, and its faults will be discussed in that podcast. We'll release it on Monday. But there's a line item on IMDb that one of the early plans during Star Trek Undiscovered Country was that Kirk would hand over the Enterprise A to Picard.
Oh,
Never mind the amount of years that were separating the two. I know. I'm
That's
like,
nuts.
Okay. Apparently that was a thing. It may not have made it into the script, but it was something that somebody probably talked about. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And they're like,
No.
There's 78 years between this and that. What are you thinking? So that was apparently the goal. I don't know why.
I would have.
Or it was like, or I think it was the Enterprise B. Like the Enterprise B, Kirk was going to hand it over to
Still.
Picard, but that's again 78 years. Picard wasn't even born at that point. It made me laugh. There's a lot of things. So yeah, it's Star Trek. The movies are fantastic, except for Nemesis. May it rot in the dungeons of despair, because it's just.
Why don't you go and remake it and make it a good movie?
Give me money and I will. I would do.
I'm sure we could make a good version of Nemesis.
Oh. Well, I'm sure there's on YouTube. There's probably somebody who's written that story idea out on their YouTube channel, been like, here's how I would have had the story go. It could have. Here's what I think. I think they were trying to do First Contact again. They were trying to have the echoes of Picard's past with Tom Hardy as his clone, and that was supposed to mirror like what they were doing with First Contact with the Picard and Borg past, and how he was fighting that.
But see, that worked. First Contact worked.
Oh, First
Contact was a great movie. I love that movie. It was
amazing. Yes, but they didn't do so well in Nemesis. Anyway, what is your favorite, to close this out? What is your favorite Thanksgiving food ever?
Oh, ever? Oh,
ever.
I don't. That's a hard one because it's all good. But my staple, staple for any Thanksgiving meal, is probably not what you would think. But one of my staples that must be at every Thanksgiving for me is something that I really enjoy is homemade mashed potatoes. It's just my thing. I love mashed potatoes. Give me some homemade mashed potatoes and some gravy, and I'm good.
Here's the thing, though. That gravy has got to be homemade too. Yes. And the gravy has to have the turkey stuff in there.
Yes.
Because if it doesn't have turkey stuff in there, it ain't gravy. That's you
can make gravy without it, but not for Thanksgiving. That's sacrilegious.
No, you can't. That is blasphemy of the highest order. You heard it here first. American Blasphemy, coming soon to a theater near you. It's a horror movie about preparing turkey the way you shouldn't, or something like that.
Gravy.
Yeah, gravy.
You messed the gravy up.
The next horror movie, and the tagline is gravy. It's good. It's good stuff. There we go. All right. On that delightful, terrifying, horror-filled, chuckling note, this has been the Quantum Photons. My name is Aaron.
And as always, my name is Stefan.
And we will see you on the next one. Thanks for listening. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Quantum Photons.